All right, here we go. All right, so again, welcome to our second session of our 2021 CSP webinar series. We'll be talking on the topic of desktop analytics, and we have Chris Ball here that will be conducting the presentation today to dive into that topic. As our series is focused on endpoint management, this is kind of our first step into developing that endpoint management strategy. One of the first things is learning about what you have, and Chris is here to kind of give us an idea and some details on how we do that. So with that being said, Chris, I will go ahead and hand it off to you.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. So thanks, everybody, for giving us your lunch hour today to talk about desktop analytics. It's one of my favorite topics as far as endpoint management goes, and we're going to get into it right now. So, all right. So our agenda today, we're going to kind of cover what it is, why customers use it or should use it, some of the technical requirements around setting it up, and how you use desktop analytics to kind of make decisions. We have everybody who's worked with endpoints in the past. We all know that it's the wild, wild west in some cases when your end users are working on these machines every day. You got people installing maybe TurboTax, they've got elevated rights, and those are some of those things you want to kind of dive into and find out about, as well as whether or not those systems are ready to move to a different version of Windows. Maybe you're going from 7 to 10 or a different build of Windows 10. So we're going to kind of talk about all those little tidbits today, as well as how to, kind of set it up. So I guess we'd open it up with a kickoff question for everybody today is, how do you gather the state of your endpoints in your environment? Does anyone have any feedback on how you're looking or finding out about what's on your systems today? Or you just don't know? So just open it up for a quick question if anyone's got any feedback on how you're doing it. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on here. So desktop analytics is, Microsoft defines it as, it's a cloud-based service that integrates with either Configuration Manager or in some ways Intune, if you're an Intune-only shop. The service, it provides insight and intelligence into your environment so that you can make more informed decisions about, upgrade readiness of your clients or even the health and security of your clients. It takes that data from your organization and aggregates that with millions of other devices that are connected to Microsoft Cloud Services, and it gives you a view of the environment. It gives you details about what's happening based on the information it's gathered from other clients. All of that information kind of is not identifiable. So when they look at that information, they don't know that Johnny in company X has app Y. And there's no way for you to view it. It just looks at the information that those applications or the state of those systems are and compares it with your environment. So when we talk about how desktop analytics works, it starts off with onboarding. So you're really bringing your systems into the environment through either Intune or Configuration Manager, and then it takes that information it receives from your systems, such as patch level, your application installs, application requirements, dependencies, and hardware information, compares that to the other data Microsoft has, and then provides you with a readiness assessment of your systems based on what you're trying to do. So if you're going from one build of Windows to another, you're able to see what systems are ready for that and what systems may have a patch or driver or application that you need to address. It even gives you information about things like Office macros and plugins, which we all know plugins into Office, especially Excel, are all over the map, especially if you're working with anyone in the finance industry. So the biggest question here is probably, how does it know about line of business apps? Maybe you've got third-party applications or applications that you've developed in-house. It can provide you some information on readiness on those applications, even though they may be specific to your environment. And we're going to talk about that coming up, how you can understand what's going on with your line of business apps as well. So a lot of customers use desktop analytics for dashboarding, patches, security, and migrations, typically Windows 7 to Windows 10. When you're looking at the dashboard that's here in the screenshot on the slide, now this is where security updates and feature updates live today. Those things are actually going to be moved to, I believe it's the update compliance page within Endpoint. Griffin, are you on? Is that correct? I think it's moving to update compliance then. All the information around security updates.
That's correct. So as they're continually to update the service and how things are tied together, because there's lots of disparate portals out there.
Yep. So since Windows is now a service model, you're going to continually use these compliance pages to gain insights into readiness and your Windows 10 feature builds. This is helpful because most of you already know the time for your Windows build is supported. The time that it's supported varies depending on whether it's a spring build or a fall build. Spring builds currently provide 18 months of security patches and support, and fall builds, I think, fall under the 30-month category. So if you're going to standardize on a build, that's something I would recommend is doing something like fall builds, because that way you get longer patch times. And if you have an internal project that comes up, that helps you with, it gives you a little more breathing room, really, to get your daily IT stuff done. So when we talk about line of business apps, we've mentioned this before. Microsoft doesn't know everything about your app, but it knows Windows. And it knows about the code changes that are made within the Windows OS. And based on the application data it gathers from your apps, it can tell you, it knows about changes to .NET, drivers, driver requirements, dependencies. You've got whether your app has a call for UAC or has some old 16-bit binaries that maybe they're retiring. Based on the information it gathers from your applications, it can provide you a note as to whether or not, hey, you know what, we're making this change to this old version of .NET Framework, or this old version of .NET Framework is going to be deprecated. So if you've got applications that are in-house that require an old version of .NET that's going to be deprecated, you might want to consider updating that. And Microsoft, if they have recommendations, will actually suggest what your remediation course of action could be, and we're going to look at that as well. Dashboarding is probably is all over the place, and is probably one of the most popular features within desktop analytics. You can roll this into even Power BI and get more features and functionality out of your tools that you have. But as you can see from this dashboard deployment, it provides you with a high-level set of information regarding your deployment progress. So number of days left in your deployments, number of eligible devices based on applications and other information you deem as compatible. And so we take all that information that we get and we make data-driven decisions. What does that actually mean? Well, data-driven assessment really provides you with information on your endpoints. So it tells you what may block upgrades or things that might need to be reinstalled. When you look at apps and app risk assessments, which we've talked about already, those break out upgrades into assessments for applications into 4 categories. You've got low, medium, high, and unknown. And you'll see some of this here in a bit. The service, if it's a low category, basically the service found no signals or issues to put the app at risk for a Windows upgrade. So it's likely to work with the target operating system as it is. If you see something that's flagged as medium, then that indicates that the application may have some sort of impaired functionality, but there may be a remediation available. And Microsoft, if they have a way to remediate that issue, will provide that to you in the console. And we're going to look at that in just a minute. And then high, basically meaning the application or driver, whatever it is almost certain to fail during or after the upgrade, and it may need remediation. Could also mean that it's going to block the upgrade entirely. And if it's unknown, then the app was not assessed. So there are other insights such as Microsoft known issues or Ready for Windows that can help you make those decisions. So when you take a look at driver data, here, if any of the systems you select have compatibility issues, you can look at the overall noted compatibility risk. And you can see here from the screenshot, it tells you Microsoft known issues, application is removed during upgrade. And we're really talking about an Intel Bluetooth driver. That's what's being selected. You can see on the slide that the number of systems it's installed based on the deployment plan that you're building and the percentage. So out of this deployment plan, even though there seems to be a lot of systems in it, there's only 15% of the systems that are affected by that Intel Bluetooth driver. And Microsoft, as you can see under recommendations, Microsoft will tell you, hey, this application is removed during the upgrade due to compatibility. But you know that in order to mark that as ready, you can, once you build a remediation process for that driver, you can go ahead and flag that from upgrade decision to from not reviewed to compatible or ready for ready. And when you do that, that will aggregate that information across all the devices that maybe are that were flagged as going to have an issue, and then it'll say, hey, they're compatible and ready to go. And then when that happens, Desktop Analytics will tell you, hey, you know what, these 50 or 60 or 80 machines that have this driver that you flagged as okay are now ready to do ready for upgrade. Same thing with application readiness. You can see the App Insights and the analytics that it provides, known compatibility issues that Microsoft knows about. As you can see here under high density, where it says no issues detected and insights, that there's an adopted version available. There's an alternative version, which is highly adopted or adopted on commercial devices, and it's ready for Windows. And as you go through this, you can continue to see what is going on with your applications. As you flag applications for that are ready for upgrade, the more you mark as ready to go, the more systems you have ready for that next build. And deployment status. As you start to build your readiness criteria and build your deployments through Desktop Analytics, you can see how your deployment progress is going, systems that might need attention, systems that have been completed or not started. And you can dig into the details of that deployment status of specific systems and get more information. If there's a failure, you can get information as to why it failed and look at how you can address those problems. Next, we're going to talk about setting up your Desktop Analytics workspace, how you go about doing that, and some of the technical requirements, the licensing, and if there's additional costs surrounding that. Does anyone have any questions about the dashboarding or features and functionality of some of the Desktop Analytics stuff before we move forward?
There were no questions that came in the chat, but there were some comments back to your original query on what people were using today. And yes. There was some comments around SCCM at times, and then also for server endpoints using Splunk. So not sure if that has an impact on what you're going to be covering, but I just thought I'd mention it.
Okay, so if you're using Configuration Manager today, Desktop Analytics is really designed to be a bolt-on to Configuration Manager. So if you've got Configuration Manager in your environment and you've got an Azure tenant, you're halfway to using Desktop Analytics if you're not using it today. And all that information that you gather, you deploy Desktop Analytics from Configuration Manager to your endpoints, and then your endpoints will just roll that information up into Desktop Analytics. With Intune, you can still push those policies out to systems. However, if you want to do things like deployment of feature builds or security updates, those have to be done through Intune and not through Desktop Analytics. So you have an extra step if you're an Intune only shop, but you can still take the data and information you get from Desktop Analytics and use that to qualify readiness and push out updates to your systems. You just have an extra step in there. So from a technical perspective, there are not a lot of requirements needed to set up your workspace. You've got to have a physical system, an Azure subscription, global admin rights for initial setup. Once you set everything up for Desktop Analytics, there's a Desktop Analytics Workspace Administrator group that you can add, or role rather, that you can add other team members to, so that those folks in your environment who would be using this tool can gather that information as well. You've got to have devices that are running 7, 8, or 10, although if you're still running 7, it's no longer supported, but you still can get some information off of it with Desktop Analytics. So, Rick, your question is, can you gather Desktop Analytics from Macintosh machines?
Correct.
So that's a great question, and that's actually something I don't have an answer for.
Okay.
Griffin, do you have any idea if you can gather analytics data from Mac? I don't know if you can or not.
So Desktop Analytics is geared towards Microsoft Windows in particular, from an endpoint perspective, to help kind of maintain the servicing model that is different from previous operating systems. So it's just focused on Windows right now. I don't know if they're continuing to add different pieces that tie into the other device types, but right now it is geared specifically towards Windows endpoints.
Yep, I think they just added with Config Manager 2010 the ability to use Desktop Analytics on long-term service channel versions of Windows. I know that was recently added.
Oh, that's cool. All right, thanks for the answer.
Sure. As far as licensing requirements, if you've got an Azure subscription and your endpoints are either Windows 10 Enterprise with an E3 or E5, or if it's M365 for Business, A3 or A5 licensing, you've already got licenses for analytics. So usually you have with Log Analytics, because Desktop Analytics and Log Analytics kind of work together, you usually have like 500 meg free of data that you can upload to Log Analytics a day. But Desktop Analytics is an exception to that limit, which really means we can use our telemetry data on a lot of different devices. The data that's sent to Microsoft, I believe, is stored for like 90 days, and that time frame is fixed. I think if you pay for Log Analytics, you have the option of extending that up to 730 days. So setup is pretty straightforward. Once you get into your tenant, you just click on all services and click on Desktop Analytics, and then start this wizard that you see here. The first screen is very simple. You just accept your service agreement and click next. Next, you go through all of the licensing costs associated with the tenant. As we previously mentioned, the licensing is pretty straightforward here. So if you've got any of those, also supports Windows VDA licenses if they're E3 or E5 as well. But you have to mark this as yes, and it'll explain to you why you need those subscriptions, and you click next, and you're all set. The next step for setting it up is just to assign workspace owners. So initially, on initial setup, you can go ahead and assign the teammates or folks that are in your environment that need access to analytics for whatever reason, whether that's read-only to check and see what's happening with a deployment, or if that is for full admin access. So you go ahead and add those workspace owners to the window, and you click next. And then you're off to the next part, which is setting up your workspace. When you go to set up your workspace, you just choose your Azure subscription. You can see here in my test, just as Azure subscription 1. Once you do that, you click on Add Workspace, and that takes you to your next round of setup. Once you get to setting up your workspace, you're going to create a new workspace, a new resource group, and you're going to choose your region closest to your organization. So you can have this positioned in different places. It just depends on where you're located at and where you want this tenant to live. Give your workspace a name and click next. Once that's done, you need to go ahead and set up the workspace as your desktop analytics workspace. It's pretty straightforward. You just click on the workspace that's there, and you'll be asked if you want. You'll ask if you want to confirm and grant access to your workspace. You click continue. You'll run through the basic information. If you needed, you have to wait a few minutes for it to set up. You run through some basic steps afterwards to enroll your clients. And after that, you're off to the races. It's really very simple to set this up. So your next steps, once your analytics workspace is up and running, is really to get your systems enrolled in desktop analytics. Typically, when you first log into your tenant, you'll see a little notice that'll say, hey, wait 72 hours to populate it with some data, check back with us. And then as your clients start to report information back to analytics, you'll start to see that data populate within your tenant. After that, you start to evaluate the results that you're being given. Review your line of business apps with your vendor or app owner and developer. If you have internal apps that may require additional time, for your internal teams to review, you can provide them with any information that Microsoft might give you so that they have a head start. You can take the information that you're getting, and then you can build your remediation plans and deployment plans in parallel. And the reason you're going to do that is because you probably already have systems that are ready based on some of the information, based on their state today. So there may be some systems that update their information, and hey, all this stuff is ready to go. So you can start building deployment plans for systems that are already available or ready for that next version of Windows. And in the background, you can look at the applications and your drivers, security updates, and other things that are part of desktop analytics that might be a blocker to prevent you from updating systems. So you may have some finance apps that say, hey, you know what? They need a new version of .NET Framework, or they need a new version of this application. Or if some of you started to notice, if you use apps like Symantec Endpoint Protection, that can be a blocker because Symantec has started to be in lockstep with Microsoft. So as Microsoft releases new builds, Symantec releases a new build of their endpoint protection application to keep in lockstep with Microsoft's build strategy. And then you just continue. This just becomes a life cycle of how you manage your systems. As new systems get onboarded, you're going to get new readiness information. They're going to fall into a new group that you can begin to deploy to, and you'll just continue to use this in a cycle. As Microsoft releases builds, you'll follow the same process over and over again. And that's really, desktop analytics is a very simple topic. Unfortunately, we did not have a tenant that we could get into some of the more in-depth clicking around like Chris and I normally like to do. But we will have that for the future webinars. So does anyone have any questions?
So Chris, was analytics originally created because of the issues going from one current branch to the other? Was that the genesis of it?
So desktop analytics used to be Windows analytics. And when I first got introduced to it, it was originally OMS/Windows Analytics, and that was released as people were doing their 7 to 10 upgrades and starting their build cycle. So as these updates continue to happen, Microsoft said, "Hey, you know what? We really need to give people a way to, to keep their systems supported." And so that's one of the reasons they made it basically free. It's probably one of the best tools that Microsoft originally created for getting information in your endpoint outside of like Configuration Manager or something like that. But I think that was the catalyst for this. I don't know what I think there was Windows Analytics, and I think it was something else beforehand, but I can't remember what it was.
So yeah, there was Upgrade Readiness and Windows Analytics, but those three products actually replaced what used to be on premises. That was the Application Compatibility Toolkit. So as they started to roll out Windows 10, it totally changed the process of how endpoints are treated on, there's no more big bang, big upgrades. It's these micro upgrades as you go from iteration of Windows 10 to Windows 10. So in leveraging all of that data in the cloud, okay, we can provide these very powerful insights to help our customers make that jump from those big bang type migration projects to being more process oriented, that project to process that needs that data on the back end. So from even going from one version to 10 to the other, where there's going to be blockers and be able to make that more of a seamless life cycle when going through those perpetual upgrades. Because like you said, it's once you're on the Windows 10 Ferris wheel, you're not getting off.
And I do know they keep getting better with threat detection and issue resolution, especially when it comes to drivers. It seems they just continue to get better at that.
Yeah, drivers can be a very finicky creature, and I like to highlight Bluetooth drivers, especially because I have been dinged a number of times in the past with driver compatibility, or hey, my Bluetooth, all these apps are, all these things are uninstalled now, and having to go back and find that information is quite difficult if you don't have a tool like Desktop Analytics to tell you whether or not that driver may or may not impact your ability to do upgrades.
Yeah.
And Microsoft and other vendors are releasing driver packs to keep in lockstep with Microsoft builds. If you are a Lenovo shop today and you go and look for SCCM driver packs, you will see driver packs based on build, based on version.
All right. Well, great job, Chris. Appreciate all the information that you provided. I do have our schedule up for our 2021 webinar series up on the screen now. So as you can see, our current session is the second one there, Gaining Insights from Desktop Analytics. But I do want to call out that we will be having our next one in March 16th, and the topic will be configuring your devices from the cloud. And that topic should be covering using Microsoft Endpoint Manager to configure your devices. So as we continue on this journey of developing a endpoint solution, a cloud-driven endpoint solution for your organization, we want to start diving into some of the technical capabilities for doing the configurations. So I also posted a URL in the chat for the session feedback. One of the questions in there is about our upcoming session. So if there's any specific topics that you want to hear about, anything that you want us to cover or demonstrate underneath that umbrella of configuring your devices from the cloud, use that feedback form. Let us know. The presentation has not been pre-crafted, so your feedback will be taken into consideration, and we will make sure we address as much as we can, especially if you have something specific you want to see during that presentation. But otherwise, I will go ahead and say, I appreciate everyone's time and attendance for this webinar session. If you if you have any questions that you want to ask off the recording, I'm going to stop the recording here, but I think the improvement team will hang on for a little bit after I stop the recording. So if you do have any questions you want to ask, feel free to hang on and ask those questions. But again, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Chris, for the great presentation.
out for a little bit. Thanks a lot. I'll hang out for a little bit if anyone's got any questions.